believe people express their appreciation to the rest of humanity is to make something wonderful and put it out there. And you never meet the people. You never shake their hands. You never hear their story or tell yours. But somehow, in the act of making something with a great deal of care and love, something's transmitted there. And it's a way of expressing to the rest of our species our deep appreciation. So we need to be true to who we are and remember what's really important to us. Steve, 2007. This 2007 quote is Steve at his core. Creation isn't about ego or money. It's about giving something meaningful to the world. The iPhone's elegance. Pixar's emotional depth. They carry Steve's care, touching people he'd never meet. It's a quiet, almost spiritual view of making, rooted in authenticity and gratitude. Page 4, Laureen Powell Jobs Introductions. Introduction by Laureen Powell Jobs. Edited by Leslie Berlin. Contents have been edited and excerpted for clarity and privacy. Dye indicates that several sentences or paragraphs have been removed from the original. See Laureen's name and Leslie's editing tell us this is personal, carefully shaped. The T symbol shows gaps, but the heart of Steve's voice stays intact. It's like an Apple design, sleek, deliberate, with space for imagination. Page 5 of Laureen's introduction S. Continued. The best way to understand a person is to listen to that person directly, and the best way to understand Steve is to listen to what he said and wrote over the course of his life. His words, in speeches, interviews, and emails, offer a window into how he thought, and he was an exquisite thinker. Much of what's in these pages reflects guiding themes of Steve's life, his sense of the worlds that would emerge from marrying the arts and technology, his unbelievable rigor, which he imposed first and most strenuously on himself, his tenacity in pursuit of assembling and leading great teams, and perhaps, above all, his insights into what it means to be human. Steve once told a group of students, "You appear, have a chance to blaze in the sky, then you disappear." He gave an extraordinary amount of thought to how best to use our fleeting time. He was compelled by the notion of being part of the arc of human existence, animated by the thought that he, or that any of us, might elevate or expedite human progress. It is hard enough to see what is already there, to gain a clear view. Steve's gift was greater still. He saw clearly what was not there, what could be there, what had to be there. His mind was never a captive of reality. Quite the contrary, he imagined what reality lacked and set out to remedy it. His ideas were not arguments, but intuitions born of a true inner freedom and an epic sense of possibility. In these pages, Steve drafts and refines. He stumbles, grows, and changes. But always, he retains that sense of possibility. I hope these selections ignite in you the understanding that drove him, that everything that makes up what we call life was made by people no smarter, no more capable than we are, that our world is not fixed, and so we can change it for the better. Laureen paints Steve as a visionary who blended art and tech. Think Apple's beauty meeting its function. His self-discipline, pushing himself hardest, shaped Apple's perfectionism. The blaze in the sky line shows his urgency, life short, so make it matter. Steve didn't just see reality, he saw what it lacked and built it. The Mac, iPod, iPhone. Laureen's call to change the world echoes Steve's belief. We're all capable of creating something wonderful. Page 6. Steve at 2's. Steve at 2. He later called computers a bicycle of the mind. Toddler Steve, paired with his later metaphor, is powerful. Computers to him were tools to amplify thought like bikes boost movement. Even at 2, you feel the seeds of his curiosity. Page 7. Steve on his childhood was. Steve typically kept his personal life private, but he did occasionally talk about growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area. It was a time when engineers and programmers began flooding into what came to be known as Silicon Valley. As in 1995, he recorded an oral history for the Smithsonian. I was very lucky. I had a father, named Paul, who was a pretty remarkable man. He never graduated from high school. He joined the Coast Guard in World War II and ferried troops around the world for General Patton. And I think he was always getting into trouble and getting busted down to private. He was a machinist by trade and worked very hard and was kind of a genius with his hands. He had a workbench out in the garage where, when I was about 5 or 6, he sectioned off a little piece of it and said, "Steve, this is your workbench now." And he gave me some of his smaller tools and showed me how to use a hammer and saw and how to build things. It really was very good for me. He spent a lot of time with me, teaching me how to build things, take things apart, put things back together. One of the things that he touched upon was electronics. He did not have a deep understanding of electronics himself, but he'd encountered electronics a lot in automobiles and other things that he would fix. He showed me the rudiments of electronics, and I got very interested in that. I grew up in Silicon Valley. My parents moved from San Francisco to Mountain View when I was 5. My dad got transferred, and that was right in the heart of Silicon Valley, so there were engineers all around. Silicon Valley, for the most part, at that time, was still orchards, apricot orchards and prune orchards, and it was really paradise. I remember almost every day the air being crystal clear. This 1995 Smithsonian oral history shows Steve's roots. His dad, Paul, a hands-on machinist, gave him a workbench at 5 or 6, sparking a love for building. That garage, filled with tools and curiosity, feels like the origin of Apple's tinkering spirit. Silicon Valley's orchards and engineers shaped Steve's world, a blend of nature's calm and tech's buzz. Page 8. A mentor in Heathkits, where you could see from one end of the valley to the other. It was really the most wonderful place in the world to grow up. There was a man that moved in down the street, maybe about 6 or 7 houses down the block, who was new in the neighborhood with his wife. And it turned out that he was an engineer at Hewlett Packard, and he was a ham radio operator and really into electronics. What he did to get to know the kids on the block was rather a strange thing. He put out a carbon microphone and a battery and a speaker on his driveway, where you could talk into the microphone and your voice would be amplified by the speaker. Kind of a strange thing when you move into a neighborhood, but that's what he did. I got to know this man, whose name was Larry Lang, and he taught me a lot of electronics. He was great. He used to build Heathkits. Heathkits were really great. Heathkits were these products that you would buy in kit form. You actually paid more money for them than if you just went and bought the finished product, if it was available. These Heathkits would come with these detailed manuals about how to put this thing together, and all the parts would be laid out in a certain way and color-coded. You'd actually build this thing yourself. I would say that gave one several things. It gave one an understanding of what was inside a finished product and how it worked, because it would include a theory of operation. But maybe even more importantly, it gave one the sense that one could build the things that one saw around oneself in the universe. These things were not mysteries anymore. I mean, You looked at a television set, and you would think, I haven't built one of those. But I could. There's one of those in the Heathkit catalogue, and I've built 2 other Heathkits. So I could build a television set. Things became much more clear that they were the results of human creation, not these magical things that just appeared in one's environment that one had no knowledge of their interiors. It gave a tremendous degree of self-confidence that through exploration and learning, one could understand seemingly very complex things. Larry Lang, the HP engineer, opened Steve's eyes to electronics with a quirky driveway setup. Heathkits, those DI kits, were a revelation. More than just building, they demystified technology. Steve's realization that TVs weren't magic but human fueled his confidence. This is where the Apple-ized spirit was born. If you can understand it, you can create it. To page 9-day school struggles and a turning point in one's environment. My childhood was very fortunate in that way. Her school was pretty hard for me at the beginning. My mother taught me how to read before I got to school, and so when I got there I really just wanted to do 2 things. I wanted to read books, because I loved reading books, and I wanted to go outside and chase butterflies. Do the things that 5-year-olds like to do. I encountered authority of a different kind than I had ever encountered before, and I did not like it. And they really almost got me. They came this close to really beating any curiosity out of me. By the time I was in 3rd grade, I had a good buddy of mine, Rick Ferrantino, and the only way we had fun was to create mischief. I remember there was a big bike rack where everybody put their bikes, maybe 100 bikes in this rack, and we traded everybody our lock combinations for theirs on an individual basis. Then Wet went out one day and put everybody's lock on everybody else's bike, and it took them until about 10 o'clock that night to get all the bikes sorted out. We set off explosives in teachers' desks. We got kicked out of school a lot. In 4th grade, I encountered one of the other saints of my life. They were going to put me and Rick Ferrantino into the same 4th grade class, and the principal said at the last minute, "No, bad idea. Separate them." So this teacher, Mrs. Hill, said, "I'll take one of them." She taught the advanced 4th grade class, and thank God I was the random one that got put in the class. She watched me for about 2 weeks, and then approached me. She said, "Stephen, I'll tell you what. I'll make you a deal. I have this math workbook, and if you take it home and finish it on your own without any help, and you bring it back to me, if you get it 80% right, I will give you $5 and one of these really big suckers." She had bought a sucker, and she held it out in front of me. One of these giant things. And I looked at her like, "Are you crazy, lady? Nobody's ever done this before." And of course I did it. She basically bribed me back into learning, with candy and money. And what was really, school was rough for young Steve. His love for reading and exploring clashed with rigid authority. His mischief with Rick Ferrantino, like the bike lock prank, shows a restless, creative mind. Mrs. Hill's bribe, candy and cash for a math workbook, flipped a switch, reigniting his curiosity. Her belief in him, paired with tangible rewards, echo Steve's later knack for motivating teams with bold challenges. Page had unveiled Mrs. Hill and Reed College. Remarkable was before very long I had such a respect for her that it sort of reignited my desire to learn. She was remarkable. She got me kits for making cameras. I ground my own lens and made a camera. It was really quite wonderful. I think I probably learned more academically in that 1 year than I'd ever learned in my life. In 1984, Steve chatted with reporter David Sheff about how, as young adults, he and others of his generation began to develop their own cultural outlook. My parents never pushed me to go to college, but they always wanted to make sure that if I wanted to go, they had the resources to do it. And they really sacrificed some and saved some money up, tray for me to attend Reed College. But after 6 months, it just seemed really absurd to be spending their life savings putting me through college. I didn't know enough about what I wanted to do, and besides that, I figured I could drop out and then drop back in and take the classes anyway and learn just as much. So I dropped out after 6 months, and then I dropped in for a little over a year. I spent about a year and a half there, maybe close to 2 years, and I enjoyed it greatly. It was a hard time in my life, but I enjoyed it a lot. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and Reed was a very intense place, very bright people. Everyone out to change the world, but not knowing quite how. The early 70s was the time that sort of Eastern mysticism hit the shores of the United States, and we had a constant flow of people traveling through Reed, stopping off at Reed. Everyone from Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert to Gary Snyder, people like that. So there's a constant flow of intellectual questioning about the truth of life and existence. The idealistic wind of the 60s was still at our back, and most of the people that I know that are my age have that ingrained in them forever. They have that idealism in them, but they also have a Mrs. Hill's impact was huge. Camera kits, lens grinding, and a renewed love for learning. At Reed College, Steve faced a different challenge, directionless but surrounded by brilliance. Dropping out after 6 months to save his parents' money, he still hung around, soaking up ideas. Reed's vibe, intense, idealistic, steeped in Eastern mysticism, shaped his openness to big questions, a trait that later fueled Apple's bold vision. Page 11. Idealism and Atari, certain cautiousness about sort of ending up working in a natural food store behind the counter when they're 45 years old, which is what they saw some of their older friends doing. Not that that's bad in and of itself, but it's bad if that's not what you really set out to do or what you really wanted to be doing. So that idealism was formed, but also the feeling that there had to be a more successful way of realizing some of that idealism. Steve also recalled his time in California and India after leaving Reed College. I came back down to the San Francisco Bay Area, because I decided I wanted to travel, but I was lacking the necessary funds. This was California. You can get LSD fresh, made from Stanford University. You can go sleep on the beach at night with your girlfriends and whatever meaningful others. You could. I didn't really realize how different California was than the middle of America, and even to some extent the East Coast, until I traveled to those places. I'd never been to any of those places until my early 20s. California has a sense of experimentation about it, and a sense of openness about it, openness and new possibility, that I really didn't appreciate till I went to other places. So I came back down to get a job, and I was looking in the paper, and there was this ad that talked about being an engineer and having fun at the same time. It sounded like fun, so I called. It was video game manufacturer Atari, and I filled out an application, just listed all the things that I'd done. And the personnel woman said, "Well, don't call us, we'll call you." But then some stroke of luck got my application to a man named Al Alcorn, who was the vice president of engineering at Atari at the time. And he called me up the next day and hired me, and it was great. I was there a little less than a year, and they had shipped a bunch of games to Europe that had some engineering defects in them. I figured out Steve's generation balanced 60s idealism with pragmatism. They wanted impact, not just dreams. California's experimental spirit, from LSD to beach life, fueled his openness. Landing at Atari through a lucky break, Steve found a playground for his skills. Fixing defective games in Europe was his ticket to travel, blending work with adventure. Page 12. India and return, how to fix them, but it was necessary for somebody to go over there and actually do the fixing. So I volunteered to go. Well, they asked me if I'd go, and I said I definitely would love to, but I'd like to take a leave of absence when I was there. So they let me do that, and I ended up in Switzerland and flew from Zurich to New Delhi, and I spent some time in India. I'm stupefied to sort of summarize my trip to India. Anyone would have a hard time summarizing a meaningful experience of their life in a page. I mean, if I was William Faulkner, I might be able to do it for you, but I'm not. Coming back was more of a culture shock than going. All I really wanted to do after returning to California was to go find a grassy meadow and just sit. I didn't want to drive a car. I didn't want to go to San Francisco or do all these things. I didn't want to do it. So I didn't for about 3 months. I just read and sat. When you are a stranger in a place, you notice things that you rapidly stop noticing when you become familiar. I was a stranger in America for the first time in my life, and so I saw things I'd never seen before. And I tried to pay attention to them for those 3 months, because I knew that gradually, bit by bit, my familiarity would be gained again. India was transformative, though Steve struggles to articulate it. The return was jarring. He needed to pause, reflect, and see America anew. Those 3 months of reading and sitting weren't idle. They were Steve processing, sharpening his ability to notice what others miss, a skill that later defined his vision. Page 13, a young Steve's passport. Steve's passport, spring 1973. He was 18. At 18, Steve's passport photo hints at the restless seeker he was, ready to explore, question, and build. It's a snapshot of a kid on the cusp of greatness. Steve's story in these pages is about curiosity and courage. From Paul's workbench to Larry's Heathkits, he learned to demystify the world. Mrs. Hill rekindled his love for learning, while Reed and India expanded his mind. Atari gave him a stage to tinker, and his return from India sharpened his perspective. Each moment built the Steve who saw what had to be there and made it real. His belief in making something wonderful, whether a computer or a film, tied it all together, a gift to humanity. Drop your thoughts. What does Steve's early life stir in you? How does his drive to create resonate? This is just the start of our journey through Make Something Wonderful. I'll catch you in the next video.